Hi, this is Joyce Pellino Crane. I'm the news director at WestfordCAT. I'm here today with the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Congressional seat, Third District, Lori Trahan.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
It's good to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I wanted to start our interview with going over a little bit about your background.
Sure.
And telling me a little bit about how you grew up and where you grew up.
Yep. So I grew up in Lowell. My grandparents actually came here from Portugal. My dad was a union iron worker, and my mom spent most of her childhood at the Franco-American Orphanage in Lowell and in foster care. So, went to public schools my whole life. I've got 3 sisters. Yeah.
Your mom was in an orphanage?
Yeah, she was. And
so how did that happen?
Well, her mom died at a very early age, and her sister and her went to, they were raised in an orphanage, and went to foster care, put themselves through high school. She's juggled various part-time jobs while raising my 3 sisters and me. She's sort of epitomizes strength and perseverance in my life. But we worked right away. I had a paper route when I was age 11. I worked at the Owl Diner serving breakfast while attending Lowell High, juggling school and sports. And it was a volleyball scholarship that got me to Georgetown and put me on the path I'm on today.
So you're pretty tall. I might mention, how tall are you?
I'm 6 feet. Yeah.
So that must have been very helpful when you were playing volleyball.
It was helpful in all sports. I played basketball, volleyball, and yes, it certainly came in handy, which was good because I couldn't afford to go to Georgetown, so I needed a way to get there, and volleyball definitely was the vehicle that got me there. So, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and from there I went to work on Capitol Hill. I worked for Congressman Marty Meehan in his Washington office. Mm-hmm. Worked up here in the district, ran the district office, and eventually became his chief of staff, which was, laid a lot of groundwork for this run. I worked on campaign finance reform. That was, bipartisan legislation that took the corruptive influence of money out of politics. And so I really understood and understand the legislative process and how to work with Republicans. Up here, working with state and local government to get economic development projects funded and help revitalize, cities across the district. So I know this district well. I actually transitioned and became an executive, the only female executive at a high-tech company in Cambridge.
Well, before you get to that,
yeah.
I just wanted to ask, did going to Georgetown give you the relationships that you needed to, take this route that you've taken now? Did you meet people in Washington, D.C. that you might not have otherwise have met at a different college?
Sure, yeah. I studied at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, which is a pretty rigorous international relations focused school. And I think that I got to meet a lot of people from across the country. They were proud of the fact that there was a student body that was very reflective of the globe. So that was unique to Georgetown. Did I meet folks that would have prepared me for this run? I had some great professors and deans, but no, and this really wasn't part of the plan. Even going, there are so many people who go to school in Washington, and eventually land on Capitol Hill or in a political job. But that was, and I was part of that, that path of going to college and then going to Capitol Hill. But I sincerely thought that it was going to end there. When I left the congressional office in 2005, there was no turning back for me.
How did you meet Marty Meehan?
So I came home after graduation, and I was running a community service project in Lowell. It was called Spindle City Corps. It was modeled on AmeriCorps. And I worked out of the office building that the district office in Lowell was out of. And so I got to meet members of the staff. I got to meet Marty at the time, and I wanted to go back to Washington, and they, they interviewed me. So it was, but he was my congressman, so I read about him in the paper, and I knew what he was up to, and I obviously was very active in Lowell, so there was a lot of intersection. But I didn't know that I was going to go back down to Washington until I sort of got to see that office operate up close.
And so you were starting to say that you transitioned into a business endeavor.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
So there was a company in Cambridge, high-tech company. We worked with a lot of engineers, a lot of bright people who knew how to write really smart algorithms for how to target ads and online. And so I spent a few years there. And then I started my own consulting company with 2 women from Harvard Business School. So I actually did the advanced management program at Harvard Business School 2013, and worked with companies across the country in our consulting practice on how to get more women into leadership roles, because there are too few women occupying our boardrooms and our C-suites in large companies across the country. So when 2016 happened, we couldn't help. We looked at Congress and still only 19% women, and thought to myself, you know what, we not only need more women in boardrooms across America, we could use a few more women down in Washington. So
was that the genesis for your decision to run?
Yeah, I knew I was going to do something. I had this belief, I've worked with a lot of companies across a lot of industries, and I think the one thing that I know to be true is no matter what, when disruption happens in an industry, and you could use Uber as an example, disrupted the taxi and the cab industry, change follows. People's behavior change, and I knew that was going to happen. I mean, I looked at the 2016 election, and of course I woke up and I wanted to come off the sidelines and do something, but I also thought there's going to be an opportunity here. There's never been a more disruptive force than this administration and this president, and the silver lining in all of this is that there will be a change, and I think the change is happening in these midterm elections. So,
okay, you see it as a silver lining.
Well, I see it as look, Congress wasn't working. Congress has been in gridlock for too long, and right now, when I look across,
even before President Trump?
Yeah. Prior
to?
Yeah,
under President Obama.
Yeah, well, it's just become more and more partisan, right? I mean, when both parties are dug in, and they're not, working class families like the one I grew up in get disproportionately harmed, because we need high quality public education, we need good paying jobs, we need health care and prescription drugs that we can afford. And when Congress doesn't get to work on those very basic economic issues, families suffer. So the only thing that I could maybe forecast was there was disruption in Washington. People are going to come off the sidelines, and that's exactly what you're seeing. I think people who never thought about running for Congress are running. People all over the country, that's happening. Women who are fed up are also running. And I didn't know I was going to have an opportunity to run until Congresswoman Tsongas announced her retirement. But it was a moment of clarity for me when that happened, that was the best way that's the best thing I could do to come off the sidelines and help women get elected and try to break the gridlock, try to be part of a new breed of leaders who, go down to Washington and get things done. Yeah,
so you jumped in, and 9 other Democratic candidates also jumped in.
Yeah.
And so it was a very intense primary race for the 3rd Congressional District.
It was.
And then you ultimately won by only 145 votes over Dan.
I don't know why you say only. Yes, we knew it was going to be close. I don't think we knew it was going to be that close.
I think there were 80,000 votes cast, if I remember correctly.
So it's 89,000.
Okay.
And it's so, when there's 89,000 votes cast, and on election night, the margin was, 52, and then
That's right. It was 52 on election night.
the Secretary of State certified those results 3 days later, and it became 123, I believe. And then it went into recount, which for good reason. You want people to be confident in the results of an election.
Absolutely.
So, but it was 13 days that were pretty anxiety producing for both Dan and for me. But what's great about the Democratic Party in Massachusetts, and I'm benefiting from this right now, is, the people who, we ran intense campaigns. I mean, there was no shortage of high caliber candidates in this race. And with every debate and every forum, the bar kept getting higher and higher. And so, but, within 24 hours of the recount being announced that I was the nominee, all 9 of my competitors were standing there with me, yelling into a microphone that we have to get Lori Trahan elected. And so, Democrats know how to unite. They know they're pragmatic, and really, we all shared we all shared core values, and that, we need more working and middle class values in Washington. We have to hold this administration accountable. We need to take our government back from corporations and special interests, and so it's easy to unite when you stand for the same things.
True, but and that was wonderful for you.
Yeah.
But this was a field that had people running in it who had already won elections.
Yeah.
And yet you're the one that came out on top. Why do you think that is?
A couple things. There are a few things that we talked about on our campaign. I've lived in this district my whole life. I grew up in a working class family. I really do understand the economic anxiety that plays out. And it's hard to think about anything else when you're living paycheck to paycheck. And I think, unfortunately, there are too many families across this district that are living with that anxiety, and I think that story resonated with a lot of people. I think that my congressional experience probably helped. At the end of the day, I was able to talk about the legislation that I was part of passing, working with Republicans, working with state and local government to get things done for the communities that need, public funding to revitalize their city. I was able to talk about constituent services and running a district operation where every day the phone was, picked up and we were helping people. And so, I think it was a combination of my living in the district, staying in the district, raising my family in the district, my, my understanding and, empathy for the plight of working class families, and my experience working on the Hill. I think I'll be effective right out of the gate.
Well, I want to talk about your family, but I first want to ask you, do you think also that people are just wary of the traditional politician, the person who has already sat in a position and conducted business?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a campaign strategist by any means. But I think what you're seeing across the country, the profiles of people who are running and winning, they're not people who have, run or held elective office before. They're fighter pilots. They're women with MBAs. There does feel to be a new breed of leader that is, coming off the sidelines, really interested in serving their country and having an impact, and basically, not interested in necessarily being a career politician, but, going down and try to fix, Washington.
So tell us a little bit about your family. You live in Westford.
I do.
Which is probably one reason why you're here today.
It's very close to my home.
And so you have 2 children?
Yes. So I've got 3 stepsons. They're older. They're 25, 21, and 19, 24, 21, and 19, and out of the house in college and in San Francisco. And then we have 2 daughters. My husband David and I, we have 2 daughters. They're 8 and 4. So Gracie's at the day school, and Caroline is
Not yet at school?
eager to get to school, but she'll start at the Miller next year.
So how long have you lived in Westford?
We've lived here for 7.5 years. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's
Yes,
good.
and love it.
So I want to dish a little bit about the issues.
Yes.
And I guess I'm going to lead off with the opioid crisis, because that is an
Yeah.
issue that I don't think anyone out there doesn't feel emotional about.
Right.
What can be done? I know there's some progress being made,
Yeah.
but it
Not-
is still not
yeah.
enough.
I hear it no matter where I go. And you know, in this district, you have cities like Lawrence and Lowell and Haverhill and Fitchburg that are getting disproportionately impacted by the opioid epidemic. So no matter where I go in this district, I hear about it. But whether I'm in the suburbs or the big cities, but you know, it's no question it's taking too many lives. I mean, it's a public health crisis, and I think we have to treat it as one with a lot of urgency. You know, Massachusetts has made some strides here. You know, they've been the first state to institute prescription caps, and certainly have put some funding into prevention and early education, recovery and treatment. But you know, it's if we're going to eradicate this in the time frame that we want to, you know, we need more resources, and I think this is an opportunity for the federal government to accelerate. You know, what states like Massachusetts is doing. But, you know, it's medically assisted treatments. It's making Narcan more available. I mean, first and foremost, we have to keep people alive.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, do you agree with the idea of having Narcan boxes just out in public somewhere where
I do,
if there's an overdose?
Yes. Yes, I think, you know, the priority has to be to keep someone alive, give them another, you know, shot at life. And, you know, whenever you've got the opportunity to have a healthcare professional in front of somebody who's, you know, struggling with substance misuse, you have to get them on a path to recovery. It's a long path. I mean, you know, the thing that I've learned from going to places like Megan's house and Zach's house and these homes that have been created by people who have lost a loved one, frankly. They know more about this road to recovery than anybody. But what you learn instantly, just sitting there and talking to them, is that this isn't 3 to 6 months. This isn't 6 to 9 months. I mean, this is 18 months, 2 years. This is about getting people back on track. You know, obviously getting, you know, them the treatment that they need, but then also transitioning them back into their life, like reuniting them with their family, giving them a good job. And I've seen unbelievable models out there that we should be scaling and replicating all over the state, you know, where you know, women leave these houses and they go to work, and it's a social enterprise where, you know, the money that you make or the profits that are earned from these businesses are actually put back into the treatment facilities. And there's some, you know, really noble things being done. But you're right, it needs more resources, and they need to be targeted resources, because this is, you know, it's a public health crisis, and it's taking too many lives.
Sadly so.
Yeah.
Let's move on to health care, the cost of health care, the issues of health care.
It's the number one issue.
It's so big, I don't even know what to ask you, you know, of you.
It is. You know, I'll tell you, it's a lot of folks talk about, you know, the roaring economy and the record low unemployment rate, and I talk to families, and they're not feeling it, right? They're not feeling it because the high cost of living has so dramatically outpaced working and middle class earnings. And I think healthcare is number one here. I mean, it's just, we could talk about prescription drug prices, we could talk about healthcare premiums and out-of-pocket expenses. I mean, people can't keep up with these bills. You know, first and foremost, you know, the Affordable Care Act has been under attack since the day it was passed. And so we can't take anything for granted. We have to protect the principle of the Affordable Care Act, which was that anybody who has a pre-existing condition will have access to health insurance coverage. Now, my father has multiple sclerosis. Everyone has a family member or a friend with a pre-existing condition. And what that legislation did was it gave dignity to people who had pre-existing conditions, because they no longer had to live in fear that their coverage was going to be taken away. And so I'm going to defend and protect that right. But we do need to fix the Affordable Care Act. It's been gutted in such a way that the mandate is when the mandate was taken away, sort of the affordability is threatened. But we have to fix it. I mean, I think an obvious place to start is with prescription drugs. We have no transparency into the pricing of prescriptions. We have no ability right now to enforce price gouging. Right. We don't bring generics to market fast enough. So there's a lot of work to do. But I think, this is exactly when you have a critical mass of new people all going to Washington at the same time, you've got an opportunity to kind of build some coalitions and break gridlock on issues like this. And it will require fighting the powerful pharmaceutical lobby, but I think that needs to be done. I mean, this is when I talk about going to Washington to fight on behalf of working and middle-class families and not corporate and special interests. This is exactly what I'm talking about, because it's the reason why I don't take corporate PAC money. I want everyone to know I'm working for them, no one else.
Okay, so let's move on to an issue that is really intensely being discussed right now in Westford. And, the show is called Main Street, but it's Main Street. It's just a local perspective of national issues. That's what this show is about. And so now we're dealing intensely with mental health issues and school safety.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that? I mean, there's a lot of money being tossed around, potential spending for improving the schools just in Westford.
Yeah. Look, no matter where I go, no matter what issue you're talking about, there's an intersection with mental health. Whether we're talking about if I'm in Lowell and we're talking about poverty line and people who are trying to live below or above, homelessness, certainly opioids, and I think the key is for us to have more empathy in place. I mean, there's early diagnosis. There are services that we need to make available. I think this is an area where we need to extend Medicaid so that it covers services like this. But it's one of those issues where we've got to address. It's touching a lot of different areas, and housing. I get questions from moms all the time, and how can I set my daughter up for success? She's working, but at some point I'm not going to be here. We need more housing so that she can live on her own and have a life that's successful and independent. So I think this is an area where we really have to work with our schools. We have to work with our local officials, and we have to figure out what the right prescription set is for each community on the local level.
Do you think money should come from the federal level for reinforcing the schools physically so that glass can't be shot through? And
so on the school building issue, I think school buildings should be a part of our infrastructure. And I don't think I'm alone here. I mean, we haven't funded federally. We have not funded the maintenance of our schools. And I go to schools across the district, and look, there's the common issues of crumbling ceilings and the heat doesn't work, but then we've got to make our schools safe, right? I mean, I go and sit with moms, demand action, and I listen to their issues and the things that they want me to advocate for. And it's not just about gun reform. It's about making our schools safe. And there's been a lot of studies on how to do that, how to retrofit schools. But we need funding. We can't have it both ways. We can't have no gun reform and no safe modifications for our schools. We've got to do both. I mean, this has been a tough year. It's been a tough year for educators and students and for parents. So I think that's one of the things that is giving new candidates momentum. Is this is an issue where there should be bipartisan support, and even when we're talking about guns, it's we know that there's bipartisan support for things like background checks. We should just start there. We don't. While I'd like to see many, many more things in a gun reform package, I mean, I will take universal background checks to keep guns out of the hands of people who are going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, and no fly, no buy. Right? There are people who cannot fly on our airplanes, and I don't think it's too controversial to say that they should not be able to buy a gun. So it's those things that I think you can find common ground on some issues and just move the ball forward a little bit and then move it forward again a little bit.
Well, I hope when you're there, if you get there, that you are successful in moving that ball forward a little bit. Your opponent is Rick Green. He is the Republican nominee. Yeah. And then there is an independent candidate also,
Mike Mullen.
So those are the names that will be on the ballot on November 6th.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's move on to, I really wanted to hear, we only have a few minutes left, but I really wanted to hear a little bit about what you thought of the Brett Kavanaugh, I want to call it testimony. I don't know if I guess he was under oath, so it was a testimony.
Yes, he was.
So what was your take on that event?
Yeah, I think it was Washington at its worst. I watched that. It was too partisan. Our judicial nominating system has become too partisan. I think people are fed up with that.
Is there another way to do it?
I think there are. I think there's lots of different ways that we could reform our judicial nominating system. But, it's what was clear to me, because I think a lot of people in the country watched both testimony, but yet it was still just a party line vote. And what became clear to me was the midterm election and getting that nomination through before the midterms was more important. It was more important than finding out if he was in fact the best candidate. It was more important than slowing it down and making sure that everyone felt comfortable that we had the truth. And so that is the part that is I talked to a lot of women, and they were outraged because we missed two opportunities. One, we could have maybe depoliticized our judicial nominating system a little bit, slowed down, and been more thorough. And then two, we completely missed the opportunity to have a discussion in this country about sexual assault, which disproportionately hurts women.
Well, Lori, it was a pleasure having you come here today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing what happens on November 6th.
Me too. It's just 4 weeks away.
Just 4 weeks. For WestfordCAT News, this is Joyce Pellino Crane. Have a great day.
Thank you.